So today is a culture day. I'm going to try to explain to you how Old Testament life worked on a daily basis and what it was like to be a woman in the Old Testament, and how life lived and whatnot. And so we're going to start with something called a Bet Av. No, I forgot to my pen down.
The Bet Av. Oh, okay.
I like that. Now you might recognize, if you were in the Psalm 119 class, the first one is Aleph, the second one is Beth. Well, in Hebrew, the T and the TH is the same letter, and they pronounce it sometimes as a TH and sometimes as a T.
I'm sorry.
And that second letter stood for house. Okay, so the Beth is the house. Bethlehem is house of bread. That's the Beth on there. And so whenever you see Beth is home.
Isn't it house of God? That's what I was always told, but I don't know.
Bet Av is the house of the Father.
Oh, okay.
Okay? And the other thing I noticed this last night, because we got to go to a meeting with Geronda and the people down in Modesto to see our tour guide from Israel, who was visiting the United States and going around, and he told us all about what was currently going on in Israel from his personal perspective and how his life was interacted and how his family was interacted. And in the middle of it, I don't know if you noticed, his daughter calls him Abba. Mm-hmm. So I always thought the word was Abba. So here's how.
Oh, like in Spanish.
Or even in Galatians, we are adopted, we get to call him Abba Father, right? Okay, so one thing I noticed is that if the word, the letter B has tripped me up in Hebrew since the beginning, okay? So and this is just my observation, if the word starts with a B, it sounds like a B. If the B is somewhere in the middle of the word, it sounds like a V. That's my observation. Now that might not be entirely true, but so far that's what I've noticed. So this would be called Bet Av. See, we got two B's. One's a B, one's a V. Bet Av. And it means house, and Abba means father. You guys watch The Chosen and you see Big James go, Abba, you remember that phrase? I can just hear him saying that. And so that's house of the Father. Or the Father's house, one of the two. Could be either way. And the whole culture and the whole activities function around this thing called the Bet Av. Okay? And so I'm going to try to tell you that, and I'm going to show you I'm going to take some stories completely out of order and completely out of location. So I'll be on the timeline. I'll be pulling from here, I'll be pulling from here. And it's not about the timeline or the location today. It's about what happens inside here. Okay, how that works. And these are illustrations, and I've got three of them are wonderful, and one of them is a failure. So we get to see when that failed and when it succeeded. And so that's it. Is the first thing we start with is that this is a patriarchal society. And that means that everything is organized around the oldest male in the family. And he becomes the patriarch of the family. And everybody lives inside his realm of protection. And they don't function like, their culture is so completely different than ours. In our culture, laws are carried out by the state. The economy is basically run by the state to some extent. It's not inside of a family. It's basically run through businesses on the state, and protection of the country is run by the military, by the state, so you would call that like a bureaucratic society. Theirs was not like that at all. Theirs ran entirely within the framework of what we call the Bet Av. So this is what this picture is. Inside this picture, let's see if I can draw it. Okay, here is your Bet Av, and it's your father, your mother, your kids, when your kids get married, their wives and their kids. So it's up to 3 generations usually. They don't usually live longer than that. And, well, they did at the very beginning, but later on they didn't. And it's up to usually about 30 people. And that is what they call a household. So now in our country, households are 4 or 5 or 6 or however many kids you have, mom and dad and kids. Generally speaking, grandma doesn't live in the house with the kids. And neither does grandpa, and neither does Uncle Henry and Aunt Lou and their kids. And you don't have a house with in our country, that's not how we live. That's how they lived. So it's all different, and it's interesting to understand how this all works. So this then, when the Bet Av gets a little bit too big, and we'll talk about that, as Israel's family grows, but you can think about Jacob and his 12 sons. Talk about a big Bet Av. He's got 4 wives, he's got 12 sons and a daughter, and they are getting wives and having daughters. That is what you call a big compound. And they are all living and interacting. And it's within this compound. And you kind of know that because when they're doing their businesses together as one function, when Joseph goes to check on his brothers, all those brothers have taken one giant flock or herd up to farm together. This is a function of economy in the Bet Av. So they don't have, each one doesn't have their business and this business and this business. They're all one big business.
Hey, Debbie,
Yeah?
is that where the kibbutz is modeled off of? Do you know?
I do not know for sure about that, but it might be.
Because I know my family in Israel, they all live on a kibbutz.
It's probably very much like that.
Okay.
I don't know all of Israel's current, I think probably it's half and half. They probably live in their apartments and this and that and separated, and they also live, so it's probably not, it's probably a little bit of both. Yeah. So when this gets bigger, the next thing is the clan. So several, and each of these Bet Avs would be somewhat related to the others. So eventually, Jacob's family is going to have to separate. And Judah is going to take his wife and his kids and their wives and their kids and turn into a Bet Av. And Simeon's going to do that. And then that becomes a clan. Okay? After a while, those clans get really big. And they split off. And now we have tribes. So that continued throughout the entire history of the Old Testament. So you have the tribe of Judah, you have the tribe of Issachar, you have the tribe of Zebulun. Those are all the original sons of Jacob. And he had 12 sons, we have 12 tribes. We actually have 13 tribes, I'll explain that to you. But they have, and as far as areas of land go, there's only 12 tribes with land. And so that's all coming up, we're going that. So after you get to your tribes, you kind of, when I teach it to kids, I kind of describe it as states, because they live here and they live here and they live here. But in the United States, if you live in California, that does not mean you're related to all the Californians. And if you decided to move to Texas, you would not be abandoning your family ties to do that, you know? So our states are kind of like that by location, but not at all by thinking. They lived in their families, even if they were their very large families. And by the time we get to the Exodus, and we have over 2 million people, each of these 12 tribes are what? 300,000 or 400,000 of people. That's a lot of people in a tribe. And then, of course, you get to the nation, which would be Israel. And that's the big outside section. So that's just your basic layout of how the country worked, how the nation worked in things like this. And it isn't until you get to King Saul that this is consolidated into a functioning nation, because prior to that, we're working by tribes. I mean, they're kind of a conglomeration of tribes, but as far as authority and rulership goes, this tribe rules this one, this tribe rules this one, this tribe rules this one, and the judges came in to rescue when they all failed. That's about how that goes, which happened every, 40, 50 years. We went from here to here and back up again. That's the story of the judges. Actually, it's kind of circular. But, so that's the patriarch. Now, the patriarch in the family is the responsible person. He's the oldest one. He's usually grandfather age by the time it's set up. He is responsible for the economic well-being of the entire family. So he has a profession. Let's say he is a rancher. Okay, then that family raises sheep and goats and cows and bulls and whatever. And his sons are raised to do the same thing. They don't change professions. That whatever the profession of your great-grandfather was going to be yours. And his job is to protect the economic. If there is an economic failure in that family and they don't make enough money to survive, that's on the patriarch. That's his responsibility. He also has the responsibility of enforcing the law within his so if one of his sons does something wrong, he is responsible to make the legal judgment. And if it's really serious, he has to call down the death penalty. There's one story, there's a lot of stories where this failed. There's at least one where it was so I'm going to get to that. I don't want to give away my punchline. He's also responsible for people who who are ostracized for some reason. So like you've got a son that dies, and that son has a wife, and that wife has no children yet. So she needs that father-in-law to take care of her. And I'll show you how that works in a minute. But that's his job. His job is to care for, provide for, and if there's an enemy attacking, his job is to find a way to make sure his bet of is protected from the enemy. So that's under him, and that's a lot of heavy responsibility. He's responsible for the lives of 30 people. A person's identity was based on who that man was. So that's why so many times it goes, this is so-and-so, son of him. This is so-and-so, son of him. And sometimes it would say, so-and-so Ben this, because Ben means son. So so-and-so Ben whoever means this is he, son of this. And so their identity was, who is this patriarch? Who's the head of that? When that man finally gets old and he dies, whoever is the next oldest male becomes that person. And everybody else then's identity goes, I am so-and-so, son of so-and-so. Okay? So that's how their identity works. So it wasn't like an individual identity, it was that. Yeah.
So the oldest son,
Bless you, bless you.
And then it could be a younger brother then steps in.
It could be if the oldest son dies or something,
Right.
the next one steps
So it
in.
could be like one of his brothers.
Right, and there's all kinds of times when God says, I'm gonna change up the order, which I'll show you here in a minute, and why he does that, and the conflicts that that causes, even when God does it. Because the people who were up here, who didn't get chosen, have sin natures and didn't respond well. Yeah, so there's that. The males were lined in, I hate to say it by value, lined in up by birth order. So you look at, the story's perfectly, you know the story of David and he's going to be anointed as king, and Samuel comes in and they know that something big is happening. So who does Jesse bring in? He doesn't bring in David, he brings in Eliab. Why Eliab? He's the firstborn. And then I think it's Shema. Maybe I got these mixed up. Why him? He's the secondborn. And he actually lines them up in order by birth. And he goes through. And like, can you imagine being Eliab? He's the great, handsome, military hero. And Samuel says, no. And you can just see the tension rising in this family. And then the next one and the next one, and you get all 7 of them there, and Samuel goes, all right, what's wrong here? Of course, the one I always thought it was interesting, the one that is carrying on the financial and feeding of the Bet Av, who's actually doing the work, is the one that's not considered. He's, and they have to go get him. And he comes in and he's smelly and he's dirty. He's been out living with the sheep. They don't smell good, And he's the youngest. And if you considered his inheritance, most of this I got out of this book by Sandra Richter. It's called Epic of Eden. She has a wonderful layout of how this works. And her comment was that David's entire inheritance, because he's so far down the list, could have fit in the backpack. I thought that was kind of funny. But, so yeah, he was not considered, and yet God chose him, and he became the Bet Av. And not only that, he became the Bet Av of the nation.
Yep.
Okay, so that's a huge time when God said, okay, no, you're not qualified to be that person. I'm going to up you like this. So that's your identity. If you were female, and one of the things I need to tell you is it is very hard to look at this culture and not think that the females were oppressed. You really do. That's because our culture says that if anybody bosses females around too much, they are oppressed. And that's why we had the suffrage movement at the end of the 19th century. That's why we have the women's activists and all that kind of stuff. And their culture did not function like this at all. And one of the rules of culture is you don't assume that just because yours is yours is better. And I read that and I go, oh my goodness, how many times have I read the Old Testament thinking, oh, those poor women, they are under all this stuff, And so it was kind of like, okay, it was kind of like you straightened me out too, because I didn't put it into this framework. So now I'm trying to think like their culture thinks for their women, because we will understand the stories better if we think like that and not think that just because ours is this, that ours is better. And if they saw ours, they might be horrified and say, oh my goodness, I would never want to live like that. I want my culture, right? Because that's how you were raised. So before I get down to it, that's what I got to say. A woman's identity is related to the men in her life. She is her father's daughter. She then becomes her husband's wife. And at the end, she becomes her son's mother. Okay? That is how she's related. That's how her identity is. That's how come so many times you see stories and the woman's name isn't even mentioned. Right? She is so-and-so's wife, because that's her identity. She is so-and-so's mother. She is so-and-so's daughter. Now, there's a lot of times when God has given us their names, and that's really neat because we get to know who they are, but still, they would identify themselves in that way. And there was a great advantage for that because as long as they were there, then they got to live inside of one of these. They either got to live inside their fathers, their husbands, or their sons. And that provided their provision and their protection from their birth to their death.
So even the feeding of the however many is, depending on the story on the hillside, is only referring to the adult males, right?
Yeah, the 5,000,
Is-
that's 5,000 adult males. That could have
Leaving
been,
out the women and the children.
yeah, you could have had 20,000 there.
Right.
If you said that every mom had 2 kids, that's our culture. Their culture was not every mom had 2 kids. Every mom had a huge number of variety of kids. Some had 1, some had, 12 or 20. I don't know, yeah. So, yeah, you're right. That only counted the men on the feeding of the 5,000 because that's who was counted. Yeah. So, so they lived like that. The family was an extended family, like I told you, like I mentioned. You would have, and sometimes you have a patriarch, and he's got several wives. I mean, even Hannah was one of 2 wives. And then each of those have their families that live under there. So this patriarch has all this juggling of personalities to deal with. And the women would function as the best way I could put it, as a team. And inside their compound, they would cook together. They would thresh wheat together. They would weave together. They would spin together. They would function as this team that supplied all their needs. You didn't go out and buy fabric generally. You got the wool off the sheep and you spun it into yarn. And then when we were in Israel, we saw someone doing this, and once they spun it into yarn, and they spun it by hanging it, and then had a spindle and just did like this, and that's how you spun it. And can you imagine spinning enough? Have any of you knit or crochet? Can you imagine spinning enough yarn to make anything? And then when you're done, it goes. Have you ever seen that? Okay, you have to let it set for like 5 months. And then the tension falls out of the yarn. And they would do their own dyeing, if they were going to dye it at all, and they would dye it with pomegranate juice, or they would dye it with whatever they had. And then they would then weave it. And you have this big, I'm just thinking of the huge amount of workload and why women work together in this compound. And now you finally have one piece of fabric that makes half of a garment. The front piece.
Well, and they only had, as a rule, one
Right.
outfit.
I mean, at the most they had, they tried to have 2 so you could wash one while the other one was being worn, but that was the normal thing. So on those days when it was grief and someone died and they tore their clothes, do you realize what a big, that doesn't mean anything to us. We tear our clothes, so what? You go throw them out and you go buy a new one.
Well,
I'm
and
gonna
the
go
same-
like this. Oh.
Yeah.
And then the same with giving, if someone is cold, giving them your outer cloak
Was a big deal.
was a much bigger deal than us going, okay, I'll go get the other one I have in the closet.
Right. Like I have several coats in the closet. I could give any of them away and not hardly even notice that it was gone. Yeah. So that's what, and then the food was like that too. They didn't go to the store and buy, well, first of all, you didn't hardly ever go to the store and buy bread. And you didn't even go to the store and buy flour. You had the grain that was grown on your property, and it came in, and it comes in with all the wheat and the tares all over it, and it has to be separated and crushed. and then it has to be ground fine, and then you have to make the bread, and then you bake it in a brick round oven type thing. And so this is what, and they also usually had grapes so that they could have grape juice, which what they called wine. Some of that's fermented, some of that's not fermented, and all of that. So, and not only that, you had to go get water. So you think about how much water your family goes through in one day, and would you like to carry that on your head back up the hill from the creek? Because obviously it's lower, that's where water is, you know. So yeah, I know we went to a well at, no, it wasn't Masada, where was it? Anyway, we're up on a hill. And it's a fortified city that's in ruins, but they didn't want the enemy getting to the water, and water was down here. So they blocked off the water and dug a well down through the hill. It was 168 steps down this ladder or thing to get to the water. Okay, well, I was exhausted getting down there. And then we have to climb back up. But can you imagine climbing back up with a huge thing of water? Those ladies had to have leg muscles of,
Beast.
strength beyond anything, because, and the neck, just the neck to carry it.
Well, think how God created us and made the head strong enough to be able to transport a jar of clay full of water.
I know. Isn't that crazy?
Like a lot.
And they weren't small, and I can't even stand straight enough to balance it, but yeah, so they had all these skills that we do not have. And so you can see how they work together in this team, and this is daily life for the women. And because they lived in this Bet Av, they had that safety net of food and care. They had the safety net of protection from enemies, and they had family and all kinds of things like that. So when a girl grew up, she grows up in her dad's Bet Av, but when she gets married, she leaves that and becomes part of her husband's Bet Av. All right, so this has answered a huge question for me, because I had this question for forever. And it was like, okay, Jesus and John the Baptist are cousins. Jesus is in the tribe of Judah. John the Baptist is in the tribe of Levi. And my question is, how does that work? So the reason I know he's in the tribe of Levi is who's his dad?
Priest.
Yeah.
He's a Zacharias.
Yeah.
He's a priest. He's going into the temple to offer incense when he talks to. If he's not a Levite, he's going to drop dead. Sorry. So I had these two cousins, and so that was really like, oh, this makes sense now, because it was through the moms. So the mom, Mary, is directly from Judah, but Elizabeth, who is probably her mother's sister or something like that, is married into this family, which makes her son a Levite. Okay? I get it. I mean, it's not like that's a big, important spiritual thing that you need to know, but I just wanted to know. It's one of those stupid questions I ask God all the time. Like, how did that work? And yeah, so that explained it to me.
Did they normally try to go stay married within the clan?
I think so, but I don't know that. I think that as the generations went by, it got, what the worst thing is when the son goes outside
Yeah.
the clan, the tribe of Israel, and goes over here
Yeah.
and gets a wife over here. And that happened a lot. I'm just telling you, that happened a lot. And what happened is that wife usually brings her tiny little idol into the Bet Av.
Oh, yes.
And that tiny little idol that just looks like no big deal at all becomes the huge temptation and destruction to that.
It's like the tiny drop of yeast
infecting an entire batch of.
Yes, it is exactly like that. So that's how that would often happen. And that's why they were told to marry at least within here. And often within here. Okay? So that's how that all works. If you do not have a bet ob, let's say you are married, your father has died, and you are now married, and you have not had children, and your husband dies. And he was the head of the bet ob. Now you are outside of provision, protection, you're outside of everything. And you have to realize that they didn't have Social Security. They didn't have a welfare program per se that they could go to some government somewhere and put in a claim and say, here I am, this is for me. They didn't have insurance. What if she got sick? She didn't have anything. She was completely destitute.
Is that like the story of Ruth?
You think that might be why I had to read the story. She was completely destitute. And you can even, in Ruth's story, it's even more destitute than that because Elimelech sold Naomi's land. So she didn't even have land to go back to. She didn't have a husband, she didn't have sons, she didn't have grandsons, she had no bet ob, and she had no land to return to. But I'm jumping ahead on my, yeah, that's
But isn't
okay.
that why in the Bible, a lot of times when you see the widows, mite, and all, those are women that were usually they
They usually had nothing,
Yeah.
yes. And you will also know that there was a lot of reasons, if you read through, especially Deuteronomy, there's a lot of things that says, this is for the widow and the orphan.
Right.
This is for the widow, the orphan, and the alien who is in your land. Alien meaning someone who wants to live within Israel that's not Jewish. And this is how you care for them, because that
Well, that was all they had.
that was their system, yes. And it was a very difficult time to be. So a woman looking at our culture would say, you know how many women are functioning individually? That would terrify them. They would not want to live in our culture like that. They want to be in this realm of safety because that is the only way a woman could survive back then. So there was that. If they didn't have that, yep, so they joined resources. The resources of the Bet Ob were communal within the Bet Ob, and they also, the fate of whatever happened to the patriarch happened to them all. So if the patriarch did something that was not honorable, the whole family is known as, oh, you are of the Bet of them, huh? You remember how Gideon says, oh, you can't pick me, God, because I'm of the lowest family in my clan, do you guys remember that? He's saying, I don't come from a good Bet of, God, you're picking the wrong man. Because he had a very poor reputation. That's how that came out. Alrighty, so I think I got all of that. I have to use my notes a lot this time. So patrilineal means how did you create your line of ancestry? It always went through the father. So it's called patrilineal. So you would go, the genealogy goes through the male. You would always list it like that. Sometimes females were listed in the genealogies. Most of the time, they were not. Anybody read First Chronicles? First Chronicles almost beats Leviticus.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say, especially the first 9 or 10 chapters, because it's all about, and he is the son of him, 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 and he did this one thing. And then he is the son of him, and he is, I have read it, and I made myself read it, and I go, there's a reason all these names are in here, but okay, God's just like, okay. There's a couple. Yeah.
Library for research.
There have been a lot of cool things I actually have found in there, but it's got to dig a bit to find them. The land was passed on through the son. So the land that owned goes through the next oldest son primarily, and it goes by birth order, and that's why you have a double portion. You guys have heard of the double portion? Okay, so you got a bunch of sons. Let's not even do Jacob. Let's just say there's 4 sons, and one of them is going to be the next patriarch. He's responsible for. He needs more stuff.
Resource.
He needs more resources, so he gets the double portion, and it's a blessing and all of that, yes, but boy, is it also a responsibility.
And is that a rule, basically, that
That's-
double portion the oldest?
That's right. It gets switched around a lot. I'll tell you several. You've heard of Jacob and Esau. Well,
Yeah.
God promised Rebecca that Esau is like, what, 2 minutes older than Jacob. Okay. So God promised he gets the birthright by that one. But God promised Rebecca that, no, it's going to go to Jacob. Well, that being set aside, later on in the story, here's your next patriarch, Esau, so hungry that he's ready to sell this position and all of this for a pot of stew.
Wow.
And so you can really see why God's looking ahead and saying, that might not be the best
Right.
choice for the next patriarch. Not that Jacob was so great, I'm just saying, but that is, he sells that. Can you imagine Isaac? Isaac adores Esau, and his son just sold his birthright. I mean, how would you take that? That would be, you just sold everything I am. Because his identity is in what's being inherited to his son. I can just see how that would crush Isaac tremendously. But there's a lot of times that the firstborn does not get it. Isaac is called the firstborn, and he is not. Ishmael is the firstborn, but Isaac gets the title of firstborn. And so God has chosen the firstborn several times. As a matter of fact, there's several generations in a row where God chooses the firstborn. Not 4 at least, because Isaac is not the firstborn, and yet he gets the title. Jacob is not the firstborn, that's the next one down, and yet he gets the title. Reuben is the firstborn, and it's trying to figure out which one gets the title. Is it Judah or is it Joseph? I kind of think it's Joseph. Joseph gets the double portion. Both of his sons get the blessing, and both of his sons get a tribe. That's why we have 13 tribes, and there is no tribe of Joseph. Because Joseph has 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and they get the blessing. Okay, so Jacob is skipping, when he's doing this, he's skipping over Joseph entirely and giving it to the grandsons on his deathbed, and he's next to blind, and Manasseh's the oldest one, Ephraim is the younger one, the right hand goes on the firstborn head, that's the tradition. And so Jacob goes like this, and he gives the honor to Ephraim, and Joseph says, "Oh no, Dad, you got him on the wrong heads." And he goes like this, and he goes, "No, it's like this." So that's 4 generations in a row where the firstborn does not get the title of the firstborn. And that's God choosing his line like that. So that's very interesting. There's also, in the middle of this story, there's Judah, who becomes the line of Christ, who does a whole lot of things that aren't all that great. And I'll get, yeah. This story becomes quite fascinating as how God redeems the generations, one at a time. And that's why I'm telling you about the culture, because he's going to redeem people in certain families, one at a time. And I love it. It's not just redeeming us as a group. He'll go, I'm just going to redeem her. I'm going to fix her problem. I'm going to save him and fix him. And so redemption is very, very personal. And to get in, you have to kind of get into their families to figure this out. So patrilineal means it goes through the male. It's the birth order. It gives the inheritance is carried on that way. As a matter of fact, land in Israel at this time in Old Testament could not be passed on in any other way legally except by inheritance. You could not, if you sold your land, like you were destitute, like Elimelech, he's destitute, there's a famine, there's nothing growing, he's going to leave his land, or he's potentially selling his land because it had to be bought back later on in the story. That's why I figured he sold his land. And they left and went to Moab. Okay? That sale is only good for so long. It's really a lease. And they're not really selling the land. What they're selling is how many years of crops can that land produce. So if you are, and you guys heard of the year of Jubilee, I'm sort of like all over the place here. The year of Jubilee, there's ways to get your land back. And we'll get into that. But the year of Jubilee is if you don't get it back all this time, the person who bought it only gets to have so many crops until that year of Jubilee. So if you're at year 45, you get 5 crops, that land's not worth very much. So you pay enough to get 5 crops worth, because at the end of 5 crops, that land goes back.
How often is the year of Jubilee?
Every 50 years.
50.
Okay, so if you're at year 1 and the family is destitute and they need to sell the land, then the person buying is going to buy a lot, because they're going to buy 49 years worth of crops for their own okay? That's how that works. So the land actually, as a matter of fact, it even tells us that even Israel doesn't own the land. God owns the land, and it is in covenant with Israel, which I'm going to tell you next week about how the land itself is part of the covenant of God owning the land, and he's covenanting out to the people. So that's next week. Just like you said, the firstborn is the privilege. He's going to be the patriarch. He's going to get the double portion, and his job as he's growing up is to sort of be his dad's shadow. He is to apprentice from his dad. He is to learn everything. His dad is supposed to teach him how to be the next patriarch. He's supposed to learn from his dad how to do this well. Now you look at some of the patriarchs and you go, that kid had no chance, because the patriarch himself is not that great in some of the stories. But that's how that goes. We talked about the women, the gleaning laws. You saw that in Ruth. Those gleaning laws were part of God's protection for the widows who had no bet of, and orphans or aliens. They call them aliens. I always thought that was a weird way, because as a kid, alien meant outer space,
Right.
just foreign. And so the Levirate law, thought I'd tell you how that works. You might already be familiar with that. The word Levir equals brother. So Levir means brother. So this is the law of the brother. The Levirate law is the law of the brother. And here it is how it works. You have a person, you have a person who marries into a family, and that husband dies. It's not the patriarch, it's one of the patriarch's sons. She marries one of them, she joins this bet of, and that, her husband dies before she has a child.
Okay.
Now, if she doesn't have a child, then as the generations go down and she is now an older lady, she has no patriarch to take care of her. That's how that works. So, to give her a patriarch, to give her a son, and for that son's inheritance to continue and his genealogy to continue, the brother is supposed to come and give her a son. Okay? That's, for us, that is, I look at my brothers-in-law, and as much as I love them, I would not do this.
That's like, ew, right?
Yes. But for them, that was their rescue. They needed that son, and it had to be through this genetic line. So that brother had to come and give her a son. Now, if the very first child hopefully is a boy, and if that child then does not belong to the brother as far as genealogy goes, that child belongs to the dead brother as far as genealogy goes. So that's how that line continues. If she,
It's complicated.
it gets complicated. If this brother's already married, let's say brother 2 is already married, then she becomes wife 2. And maybe she only becomes wife 2 for just that one time, you know? I don't know, but if they have more kids, then the rest of those kids belong to his line. Only the first son belongs to this line. Okay, so this continues a direct line of genealogy down. And it was an incredibly serious offense if a brother wouldn't do it. Like, she's just too ugly for me, I can't do it.
That movie Loving Leah, if you've seen that, that's
Or-
really, that's what they do.
Or if it's just,
Remember that?
and there's another thing, what if the brother is vying for firstborn and firstborn just died, okay? That puts him in position of firstborn in his mind, right? So if he gives that wife, that widow, a son, eventually he loses firstborn. Okay, so this is probably more the issue than whether she looked pretty or whether she anything like that. This is probably more the issue because they do not want, you can see the selfishness going on here. They do not want to share. He goes, I just got my chance, I'm doing this, right? That actually happens in one of our stories. And so there's that. That's how this goes down. And that's how the main inheritance goes down. That's how the land goes down. And that's part of the line of the firstborn gets perpetuated. And all of that is inherited through the son, through the male. And if there's a lot of sons, as you go down through the line, there's less and less and less and less and less for each son. Which is why David would have had only a very small inheritance. Because he's son number 8. And that's not going to get very much. And if you looked at Jacob's family, so this is what was horrifying to Jacob's family. They've got 12 sons. And Joseph is son number 11. Okay, so he is way, way, way down on the list. And Reuben is supposed to be the next one. And Jacob gives Joseph the coat.
No wonder they hated him.
They hated him. He got the coat. This coat, this robe of all these colors is a robe of royalty. Who did he just this? He's 17. Reuben is probably 35. Can you, I mean, it would just, awful. And so, and of course, at 17, I don't know. I mean, maybe Joseph was completely humble and wonderful about it. Maybe not. I don't know. I mean, Joseph is one of the best characters in the Bible, so I don't want to say anything bad about Joseph, but still, he's a regular human.
Right.
And he does tell his dreams. Now, maybe he was supposed to tell his dreams, but in his dreams, everybody's worshiping him. So, I mean, not worshiping, yeah, but bowing down. So this did not go over well. Eventually, as the story plays out, does he rescue the family?
Yeah.
Does he provide a bet for that family? Does he get the double portion? Yes. And does he act as a wonderful patriarch to provide provision? And does he take revenge on his brothers? So did God make the right decision? Yes. See? But you can see the conflict between tribes going on there. Yeah. So we better, it's time for a break, and I have a whole lot more to go. So make it a quick break this time, though, because we're not going to get through. I've got 4 stories to tell you still. And this is in Genesis. It's in chapter 38, and it has to do with Judah. And he is number 4 in the firstborn list. He's got 3 older brothers. He's number 4. And prior to this, in chapter 37 of Genesis, they've already done the Joseph thing. The brothers have already done their throw Joseph in the pit thing, sell him to the slave thing, and move on, right? Okay, so it's a long time break there. So by this time, Judah is married, and no, he's not. He leaves his bet off and goes to another location that's in Canaan, which is their area because they are sojourners. And at this time, their bet-offs are all tents because they move all the time. But he goes to a Canaanite city, and he has a friend down there, and his friend introduces him to another friend, and that friend has a daughter, and he marries that daughter. And they have 3 boys, and I can't think of them. Anyway, they grow up. So we've got time going by, and Judah has his own bet-off, and marries a girl. And she is also a Canaanite girl, and her name is Tamar. You guys know the story of Tamar? Okay, so is not a good guy. And God just says, that's the end of you, you're dead. And whatever he did, he got taken out. And but they're already married, which puts Tamar in the position of needing a Levirate brother to come in and, okay, so what's the name of the next guy? Let's see. Onan? Yeah, I think it's Onan. Onan comes in and he knows exactly what's going on. And he wants the firstborn, just like I was mentioning. And so he has to go into his sister-in-law and produce a son, and he doesn't want to do that, so in the middle of it, he wastes his seed on the ground. Okay? So God finds that very, very, very wrong. This was considered in that culture to fail to do the job was a huge, big look down. Anybody else looked in on your bet-off and you found that bet-off failed to do that job, you were really lacking integrity. You were really, really low, and they would look down on you. So this reputation goes back to Judah, because he's the guy, right? Well, Judah misinterprets the whole thing. He thinks that because so God kills the second one. So he's got 2 sons that have died now, and he's down to his 3rd son. And God thinks that something's wrong with Tamar. Judah thinks there's something wrong with Tamar. It's not the truth. God has the judgment on these 2 sons that have not I mean, in our culture, we would say we need to know what's worthy of the death penalty. God is just, so whatever they did was worthy, and wasting his seed was worthy of the death penalty back then. Okay? So he got that. Judah thinks something's wrong with her. I'm afraid to give my third son to her because I don't want him to die too. So and the third son's probably not really, he's probably old enough to do it, but not very, like he's probably in his teens or something, okay? He goes, let's wait until he grows up. So under that circumstance, Tamar should be living in Judah's Bet Av. But he sends her back to her dad's. That right there is a disgrace. And Judah sends her back to her dad's, and she has to live in widow's mourning clothes. So she's dressed in black, or I don't know, but whatever is widow's mourning clothes for them. For us, that would be black, all this. And she lives like that for years. And the third son grows up, and he's plenty able to do the job. And Judah just kind of forgets about it, so to speak. Enough time goes by to where Tamar is now running out of time, age-wise, to have her son. And she can't live in her dad's, she's not even supposed to be in her dad's bed. So she decides to take matters into her own hands. And as we look at this story, we go, this is the craziest story. And how, what, yes. So Judah's wife dies. So he's now a widow, which means he is free to, in his mind, to mess around. So he's going with his friend up to another thing to shear the sheep, and as they walk on the road, there goes this place, and they had false idol temples, and they worshipped with temple prostitutes. And the temple prostitutes would stand around on the road and contact anybody who came by. So Tamar is not a temple prostitute, but she dresses as one and stands by the road. Well, it's Judah who engages her. So you can't consider, I mean, Tamar, yes, she's doing stuff that would be completely outside of our culture, and it's probably not even, but she's also from a Canaanite culture too, you know? So anyway, Judah initiates the arrangement. She's got a veil over her face because she's all dressed like a temple prostitute, and he goes into her and she gets pregnant. But before they do that, she goes, okay, he asked her what the cost is. And she goes, and the cost is this really nice goat. But he doesn't have it with him. So he goes, I will give you this goat. She goes, well, how do I know you're going to give me this goat? And she goes, can you leave me some kind of token by which I can get the goat? And so he goes, what kind of token do you want? She goes, well, I'll take your staff, your signet ring, and your, scarf? Was that what it was? And the signet ring is incredibly valuable. It's how you sign documents. Okay, so he goes, sure. And he gives it to her because obviously he's a guy, and he's all caught up in this, yes. And so, yes, she gets pregnant, and it's in the line of the Bet Av. You see that? It's in the Levirate line. Even though it's the dad, it's still the line. So she is accomplishing this. A little weird, but she is doing this. Okay, so 3 months, she goes back to her father's Bet Av, puts her mourning clothes back on, and he goes on his happy way, whatever. Oh, he sends the goat. But his servant can't find the temple prostitute on the road. And he asks around, he goes, and the people around them said, you know what? There haven't been any temple prostitutes on the road. He goes, And the servant comes back and Judah goes, oh, well, we tried. We're not going to do anything about this because otherwise it would be greatly embarrassing to me. So he doesn't try to get the signet ring back or anything. He doesn't try to find her, because he goes, this would be a great embarrassment and this would ruin my reputation as the bet off. I'm thinking, you kind of already did, but whatever. So now, 3 months later, she's in her father's bet off and it becomes apparent she's pregnant. So the father, who isn't really in charge of her, sends word to her patriarch, and they say, your daughter-in-law has played the harlot, and she needs to go in front of the trial. So Jacob gets a bunch of people, goes to the gate of the city, and they bring her out, and he has the right to be legal judge on this matter. And he looks at her and he says, you've done that, you need to go be burned. So they're hauling her off to burn her and execute her. And she goes, just a moment, I have this one little defense to make. And she said, I am pregnant by the person who owns these things. Would you please examine them? So she does this like a court setting. Would you please examine these things? And Jacob obviously
Recognizes.
he recognizes what's going on, and his verdict decision is, she is more righteous than me.
Yeah, well.
What did you say?
She is more righteous than me. So he realizes that he was a complete failure at that. And I read that story, and I read that story forever thinking, Tamara, what are you doing? And looking at it from my culture viewpoint, like how horrible that is, and not looking at it from the culture viewpoint of really where the crime was. And so this helped me a lot to understand the story.
And she would have had nothing.
She would have had nothing.
She had none of that child.
Right.
Well,
She would have had absolutely nothing. She would have been completely destitute because she had been rejected by her family,
Right.
and she wouldn't have been accepted into this family, and nobody else is going to take her. Yeah. So you can, it still is really weird in our culture, but you can kind of see why she did that.
She was smart.
She was actually smart, yes. She is listed in Jesus' genealogy in Matthew. And women are not listed in genealogies, and Tamar is. And so she basically saves the line. And we wouldn't, even that culture saw it wrong, because that's why he was going to have her executed, yeah. So that's one story of where the bet of kind of broke down and didn't work very well. The land, we've kind of gone, oh, you wanted to know about what happened if there was no sons in the family whatsoever. There's a situation like that. I think there's 4 daughters, and Moses is about to die, and he's given all these rules, and it's listed in Numbers, and he says, they bring a case before him, and they said, is it fair that my father, our bet is completely discontinued because there's not one son in the family to carry it on? And if any of those 4 girls got married, they joined the other ones, you see, so there is no son. And Moses makes an exception to the rule. And he says, if that's the case, then yes, they can. And so when you get into the end of Joshua and the land is being distributed, they make a point to say that these girls got their land. So they carried it on. Perhaps their sons then became the next. I didn't follow that story out far enough to see how that played out. But yes, there was that exception to the rule. There's very few times that a woman could inherit land, but that was one. You can also see why it was so critical when the lady from Nan in the New Testament, when she was a widow and her only son died. and Jesus raises the son from the dead. You can see how that was, I mean, yeah, just the fact that your son died is a big thing, but your son died and also leaves you destitute without any place to go is an even bigger thing. And Jesus saw that story and raised her son from the dead. And that was real special to me when I think about it like that. The land, like we already talked about that, the land goes to the man. This is a picture on the next, patrolocal is the technical term for how it looked, like if we were gonna lay out the map of the house. And there's a lot of these, actually we saw some of these, Martha. It's just that there's so much rubble, it's hard to identify that we're looking at this exact style of house, but it's called the 4-room pillared house. And it kind of looks like, if I do it in a real simple diagram, okay? And these are pillars like this.
Pillars, you said?
Yeah, pillars that go up, and there's usually a second story. And what they would do is, and then it would be part of a big compound. And sometimes the walls were the walls of the compound. If it was a smaller bet off, this would be the whole compound, and these pillars would, like this would have a wall, a wall, a wall, a wall, and maybe these didn't. So then we had an open area under the air, and that would be their little work area if it was a smaller one. If it was a
Like their
bigger one,
common area.
huh?
Like their common area?
Yeah, like their common area, it would be open to the sky, and it would have where they did their cooking and whatnot. Then, if it was a bigger one, this could be a big house, and they would put extra walls in here. So when you're looking at the ruins, and you see a ruin here and here and here and here and here and here, you don't necessarily identify what you're looking at, because it's just piles of rocks with partial walls built in there, so it's hard to identify what it was. But I think there was a lot of this right by Peter's house in Capernaum, Martha. This area, and then if it was a really big bet of, they would have more than one building. And you would have another one here, another one here. So downstairs was mostly storage and animals. Okay? Upstairs was where they would live. And if you had a couple and a baby, let's say they just had their first son, they might live in one of these. And then you had the brother and his wife and their 2 little kids or whatever, they might live in this one and whatnot. I'm not exactly sure how they all lived, and they're not all absolutely identical to that layout, but they're close enough to where they called that is the traditional Jewish house for the normal common person, for the normal bet off. And you could see some pictures here, the top picture there, just the pillars are in there without the wall and without the upstairs, so you could kind of see the layout. And the pillars there would create the 4th room, and over here was a divider, so that first room over there was divided into 2. You see that? And then the second picture is like a really expanded one. And the wall around the outside might have been the whole compound with several houses in it. This one is a cutaway. You see where the big black line is? That would have been a wall gone up, and you can see where the upstairs is.
And then the roof.
And then the roof, they could get up on the roof in good weather, they could get up on the roof, and so that's kind of what it looked like. That just kind of helped me to visualize what life was like a little bit. It also, you know, in the New Testament, in John 14, it says, fear not, no. What does it say? How does it start? I have that, and just tell me.
Let not your
Let
heart,
not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. For in my Father's house, in my bet of, are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you, so that when I come again, and think where I am, you can be also. I was raised that was a mansion on a hill. But I love the idea of being and then take it a step further. If Jesus is the groom and we are the bride of Christ, we leave our bet off, which is humanity and all of the fallen humanity, and we are moved into his forever. And then we have this big wedding ceremony, and we get to go to the feast, and we get to drink that wine that is he created, that is the best wine that ever was. Right? So I love that idea. It made that verse a lot very special to me, that I get to be part of my Father's bet of. And for any of us who may not have had the world's best father, and some of us haven't, this gives us the world's best father and the world's best bet of, you know?
But it still creates in our culture kind of a, what's the word, sort of confusion that, and we know we always say we're supposed to love God, then our spouse, break it down. But it's very difficult to think in those terms in life.
Yeah, because it all goes like,
Because it's like, how do I not put my husband, or if you had children, and then now take it there, where your husband will probably be alongside you, but together you're the bride
right,
to,
right, yeah.
so it's a little,
overwhelming, isn't it?
yes, because you completely have to disconnect from our human standard of
Right.
beauty.
Right. Well, I think the same thing. When I see my husband again, he won't be my husband.
Right.
And how do I deal with that? He's not my husband. You know,
It's different.
it's different. Yeah. So it's good. It's a little bit conflicting.
Yeah.
Do you have to do that by faith? I guess. I don't know how else to say that. It's just know that that's the way it is.
Well, yeah, we have to believe that when that moment happens, it will be no longer confusing.
Right. And
It's
it
not about a confusion.
Right, and at the same time, it's so wonderful, the other doesn't even matter anymore. I mean, at some point, there's
Or
gotta
it'll just be,
it'll just be of such, I don't know, can't, yeah.
like, I find it hard to believe that the pets that I have loved so much that I won't be able to experience them.
You don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It'd be nice if they were
They're
there.
getting mad at me that I even would have that discussion. Do you think animals are worthy? And I'm like, I
So,
gave me comfort.
yes. So now Ruth's story, you guys all, I think, read Ruth's story. We start off with a lady who had, her husband sold the land, so they don't have the land. They moved out of the nation, and they moved to Moab. Moab is a very, very idealistic nation. And they set up family there, and they bring their 2 boys there. Very not good for influence on what might have been teenage boys. While they are there, Elimelech dies. And so now here's Naomi with her 2 sons, and they need to have wives, so they take wives from the Moabite culture. I don't know anything about their lives prior, and we are not told, but a lot of women in Moabite culture were temple prostitutes. And I don't know that they were, but that kind of thought went through that culture. And of all the surrounding ones, Moab's way of worshiping was so abominable that God often judged them directly because of what they did. It was really bad. They marry, and then her sons die with no children. So now you can look at this heart of Naomi, and she is, I can see how she said, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, because God has rejected me. And you can see how she thinks like that. She has no land, no husband, no sons, no grandsons. She's got 2 women, and the first thing she says, and a lot of, is that, what are you going, and this is her argument to get them to go home. I can't have more sons. And if someone didn't know this culture, the first thing you would think of is, so what? What she's saying is, I can't have more sons to give you to produce a son to stay in this line. And even if I could, what am I going to find someone, get married tonight, get pregnant, and have twins, and one for each of you, and then you guys are going to wait for 20 years while they grow up, and then they're going to, right. So she is in complete, absolute destitute. And when she goes back, she does not have a place to go back to, other than just to the clan. Okay? She doesn't have a place to go back to. There isn't a direct brother. There is a close relative, but there isn't a direct brother in Elimelech, because she can't give one of her daughters to that person. So this is a really, really dire situation. Both Naomi and both Ruth and the other daughter, Orpah, want to go with her. And then Orpah realizes the absolute destitution of the situation, and she goes home to her family's Bet Av so that she can be remarried to somebody else. And Ruth says, no, I will go with you. And then there's the famous line, I will go with you, and where you live, I will live, and where you die, I will die. Your God will be my God, and where you are buried, I will be buried. It's almost, if you put it in its culture, that's overwhelming what this girl has done. And she goes back. They must live someplace. I do not know where they're living. It's probably someplace within Bethlehem. And they're hungry. And it's the end of barley season. And Ruth takes up with the gleaning laws that God has provided for the orphans and the widows. So she goes, and it says, I think this is hysterical, she happens to come upon the field of Boaz. And I'm thinking, oh God, you're so funny. Because he just put us down this, she just happens to come along the field of Boaz. And Boaz sees her, and he hears her. You guys all know the story. And then we get to the point where Boaz is not the closest relative. He does not have the right to go over to Naomi and say, let me be your new Bet Av, let me be your kinsman redeemer. It's called I looked it up. I have always learned it as this, but in Hebrew it's like that. But I was talking to Martha about that, and it means a person who is going to buy them back. It's called a kinsman redeemer. It's not just a redeemer. You actually have to be a blood relative to do this. And so you know the story. And so after he provides for her well, and Naomi gets this, I got it, and so she tells Ruth to go do the most. Can you believe what she tells Ruth to do? What's even worse than that is Ruth does it.
That's very weird. Really.
Brave.
Can you believe? Could you trust someone so much that when they told you to do this, absolutely,
Crazy thing, yeah.
and you went and did it? And could you trust the man enough to not violate you under that circumstance? Anyway. You have to give Ruth.
She has good discernment.
She had faith up big time, and so she goes. She's at Boaz's feet, and he realizes that what she's actually asking him is to be her kinsman redeemer. That this is what is happening here. She's not asking him to have a good time that night. She's not asking for any of that. She's asking him to legally step in and be her kinsman redeemer. Well, he can't do that without dealing with the closer relative. Now, the closer relative, see, what they have to do is they have to buy back the land. They have to take Naomi into their bet off and provide for her for as long as she lives. And they have to marry Ruth and provide the line of the heir. And so the other guy is willing to, when he buys back the land, that costs him a lot. And it's buys back the land for Elimelech. He doesn't buy back the land for himself. So he's just putting out the money to pay his brother's debt or his cousin's debt or whatever person this is. And it's probably a pretty good sized debt. So someone comes to you and says, you know, your cousin owes the bank $150,000. Would you please pay his debt? That's what's being asked here. So he says, I will pay the debt and I will take Naomi, but I'm not going to marry Ruth. And the reason is I'm not going to give away my inheritance to her son. This is a big cost. So he says no. And then they do this weird sandal thing. And the sandal thing, for us, makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, but for them, that is shame. So when they take off the sandal and do that, you did not fulfill the job of the kinsman redeemer. You did not do the Levirate law. And that is shame to that guy's family. So Boaz steps in. He actually praises her because she didn't go for a younger, good-looking guy. He's probably much older. And he pays the debt, provides a bed off for Naomi, provides the son for Ruth, and extends the line there.
Do we know if he had other wives?
I do not
Yeah,
know.
it doesn't say that, huh?
I do not know.
So we don't know if she was the only one, but she provided the line.
She provided the line. And that line, they had a son named Onan? No, that was the other guy. Obed.
Obed, yeah.
I knew it started with Obed. And Naomi, did you notice at the end how Naomi gets to take Obed and nurse him? It's like she gets the new son. And the line is continued. If I didn't understand how the inheritance lines worked and what this meant to the family and how I never quite appreciated how much that meant in their culture, what that meant. So now it's her grandson, yes, but she has a son. And that line, he becomes Obed then fathers Jesse, and Jesse then fathers David. So it's an incredible story. This all happens at the end of Judges somewhere. And she also is listed in. And that is our big biblical picture of a kinsman. Redeemer. Whoops. It is true, writing on the chalk on the whiteboard makes spelling really difficult. I know Marcus talked about that. This is our big picture of this. It's interesting. It has to be a kinsman, and it has to be someone who's has the price, and someone who's willing to pay the price. And that's why it kind of ties with Genesis 3:15. We had to have our Savior be the son of a woman, to be human, to be a kinsman. And he had to be able to pay the price, which was his absolute perfection being given to us. And so this is how the two stories go together. So there's another story of a kinsman redeemer. And it's a little harder. Oh, here, I was going to do Abraham and Lot. Abraham and Lot is the story of several things. When all kinds of things happen, Abraham, let me see if I can do the picture backwards. Not backwards. Over here, let's say, is Mesopotamia, and here's the Fertile Crescent, and there's the Mediterranean Sea, and here's Israel. Okay, you kind of got that? He is with Terah, his dad, and God moves the whole Bet Av with the 3 sons up to Haran. Haran happens to be the name of the oldest son. So I don't know if they named the city after the son or what, I'm not quite sure about all that. But while they're up there and he's setting up Haran to be the new Bet Av, Haran dies. And then Terah dies. And at this point, God calls Abraham. Now, Haran has a son named Lot. Lot needs to belong to a Bet Av. So Lot joins Abraham's Bet Av, and they come down to here. We got to see the gate that they walked through. It was just really cool. So they come down here. That Bet Av gets really big. And even though Abraham doesn't have any sons yet, so I had all these workers that he's taken into the family, and he's got this big family, and it becomes so big they have to split Bet Avs. And he goes, Lot, you can pick what you want. Well, Lot picks the bottom of the Valley of Jordan. We would look at that and we would go, that is the worst place to pick. That's where the Dead Sea is. It's nothing there. But at that time it wasn't. It was the most beautiful place in the land. And probably the river went through that lake and exited down into the Gulf of Aqaba. And so it was this beautiful place. It was the best place to go. And Abraham then takes the rest of the land. And not as far as living with their ranchers and their farmers and all that kind of stuff. So they go down there, and of course, there's a lot of evil down in this land. So Lot's looking at the land, not the people. The people down there are Sodom and Gomorrah and the other 3 cities. And they decide to attack. And they take Lot captive. So Lot and his whole Bet Av are taken as POWs way up to Dan, which is the northern edge as you're crossing into Lebanon. All right, today. Okay. All right, we have 2 different Bet Avs going on here, but they're part of the same clan. Abraham finds out, and he risks his family with 312 or something like that men, and they form an army and attack and free Lot. That's when they come down. They worship at Melchizedek. That's a whole different story, but that's a picture of a patriarch rescuing a family from a political enemy that has attacked and given him back. So Lot goes back to his territory, which was not a good idea either, but anyway, he goes back down to Sodom and Gomorrah. And then you know the rest of that story. But I just wanted to show you that that's a picture of a patriarch who protects his right. See, there wasn't like an army to come in and pull him out. It was, and if Abraham had not done that, that family would have stayed up there and been slaves. So that was part of the job. So there's another one. I got to tell this one kind of quick because we're running out of time. And so at the end of, near the end of Israel's story, it's about 30 years before Assyria invades the northern kingdom and takes out the northern kingdom. In the south, it's Hezekiah and Isaiah lives at this time. The kingdoms are divided. And right here, one of the last prophets to the northern kingdom to warn them that that they're in big time trouble is Hosea. And God tells Hosea, poor Hosea, I want you to be a living visual aid to my people. And this is how you're going to do it. You're going to marry a harlot. And you're going to take her in and have kids with her. And can you be, oh, yes, God, I'm delighted. So he goes and he finds some harlot named Gomer. He brings her into his Bet Av, and they have kids, and those kids have really sad names, like, I don't know, disaster, or forgotten, or abandoned, I don't know, I'm making that up, but their names mean those kinds of things. And so, but he provides her with a safe place. He puts her in here, and she's safe, and she has a family. Can you imagine how wonderful it would be for any harlot to be rescued like that? Until she wanders away and does it again. And he's left with the kids, and she's out about doing her stuff. And her lovers out there start abusing her seriously, and they ended up putting her on the slave market. And God says, Hosea, go buy her back. Because this is how I look at my people. I have purchased them out of Egypt. I have created a Bet Av for my people, and my people have left me. And I am going to buy them back. And I thought, she comes back, she has to go in isolation for a while because that's her protection. I can see him locking the gate and saying, no, you can't get out. And she probably is not pleased, but that is her protection. He's in. And I thought, how many times has God rescued me back after I have done something that I know so much better, and he's rescued me back again. And we all have stories like that. And I look at that and I think, I just have a lot of respect for Hosea, who would, can you imagine what the other people's reputation, his reputation amongst the city is for his Bet Av, and how well he did as a patriarch with his wife flipping out and going out like that? And yet he took her back, and he bought her back, and it was the price of a slave. And that is what God did for us. And that's what God still does for us. And I think that's really, really precious.
No matter how ugly we look. Or
No matter how ugly we look, and we can confess our
or
sins.
feel, you know.
Yeah, and he will take us back every time. And it's a picture of Israel. The isolation is a picture of them in captivity. And then he brings them back. So that's what that is. So that's a good picture of redemption.
That's pretty well, it's a fun novel to read, Francine Rivers.
Yes.
Yes.
Redeeming love.
Yes.
I watched it several times.
I like that.
It's a great, yeah.
Not metaphor, but it's sort of
It's like a living illustration of
Modern, more modern, although not modern.
right. So you guys get the picture. Jesus did this for us. This is our redemption. This story, if you look at your timeline, or imagine your timeline, this kind of story goes like this over and over throughout Old Testament history. You're going to see redemption, 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 and it's going to continue like that. That's why the whole picture, and then it ends with redemption in the New Testament. It ends with that. And then if you take it to the end of the New Testament, and you have a new heavens and a new earth, and you have redemption of everything. So the whole story is a picture of that. Whoops.
excellent, Debbie.
Let's pray. Dear Father, thank you for being our Bet Av. Thank you for taking us back over and over again. Thank you that you sent your son, your firstborn, in quotes, to say that he will redeem us as our kinsman redeemer. Thank you for just it all. And we can't even say thank you well enough. Just praise you, Father. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Another good